Hello. Today I will be doing a video on the 24th. In 1917, a group of soldiers who are called the 24th want the right to fight in France. Every day they face racism and abuse by the citizens and the police, and slowly it starts to take a toll on them. This did a very good job at showcasing white supremacy. A lot of what happens here still happens today, over 100 years later, and the social dynamic has not changed. If you're a black American, this is going to make your blood boil. Although this movie is violent and hard to watch, it still does it in a way where it doesn't seem exploitive. It doesn't show all the bad things happening to the black men. It shows just enough to where you know what happened, but it's not egregious. It's honest, but showcases it in a way where the black person is still seen as a human and a hero. They're not just a body that was abused. It reminded me of the Birth of a Nation ending that came out in 2016. It was respectful. Unlike 12 Years a Slave, which I hated, this is not black torture porn. Movies like 12 Years a Slave or The Butler are specifically made for a white audience to get off of. It's just senseless black pain on display with no resolution. The 24th, however, does have a purpose and has a fantastic message attached to it. After watching this, it now makes sense why this never garnered mainstream press or even made it into theaters. The message at the end was one of my favorite things, and I got chills down my arms when I heard it. How these men would rather die and sacrifice themselves for the greater good of their people than bow down to their oppressor. Unlike other mainstream movies about racism, where the message is to take your pain with dignity and grace and turn the other cheek and wait for a white person to come and save you, which is absolute bullshit, and it's done on purpose. The lead character, Boston, played by Trey Byers, did a phenomenal job. He's the head soldier who is very educated and spent a lot of time in France. A lot of the soldiers look up to him, and some are even jealous, or they think he may be uppity and may think he's better than other black people because he got to travel and get a good education, when he's not like that at all. He, at first, does have a mindset of not fighting back, and maybe if black people were to show that they were honorable and worthy of respect, that they would eventually get it. But he's not a Sambo. He's very pro-black and means well. And he starts out being naive because he did grow up in a more sheltered environment outside of the US. So he wasn't prepared for how awful it was in America. His character development grew, and he no longer looked for approval from whites. And that's the main thing I loved, was the complete honesty. It really delves deep into self-hatred, being yellow when it comes to interacting with whites, but being big and bad and bold when it comes to fighting or talking down to another black person. There was one particular character called Walker, played by Mo McRae. He was interesting because he liked to antagonize people, and he had a chip on his shoulder about the lead character. Watching him and his actions, I saw it from two different angles. First angle was that maybe he had a natural rebelling spirit against racism, and another angle was maybe he purposely defied the rules set by whites as a way of self-harming. It seems like a crazy idea, but maybe he had frustration with himself and the environment he was forced to live in, and that's why I kind of think it's a form of self-harm. It's really hard to explain, but that's how I first saw it. And he does have issues with black people who seem to be doing better than him. It's basically the classic house slave versus field slave. As I mentioned before, I don't usually like these types of movies because they're mainly catered to white people instead of being historically accurate, and they will usually crowbar a white savior. One thing I did like about the quote-unquote white savior in this was that if you pay close attention, he's supposed to be the white liberal character, so as not to make all whites look bad, thus not making the white audience uncomfortable. But this white savior is pretty accurate to the fake white liberals of today who claim to support Black Lives Matter. They do a lot of tough talk against the Richard Spencers or Trump supporters, but when it comes down to it, they will still protect those same Trump supporters by not punishing them when they commit a violent act against a black person. Or they're against giving black people tangibles. They'll march around the streets with signs talking about, yeah, Black Lives Matter, but when it comes to tangibles, specifically for black people, then they're against it. And that's exactly what happens here. A white savior who plays a colonel and has the power to punish a white person for abusing a black person doesn't do so and does a lot of tough talk. But he ends up letting the white abuser go with no more than a finger wagging. The performances from everyone was gut-wrenching. The black actors did a great job at displaying frustration and being torn and confused on what to do. But just like Birth of a Nation, this will never get the credit it deserves from any of these award shows, which is actually a good thing because that means the film did what it was supposed to do. And without giving spoilers, I love a good revenge movie. It was so badass and even surprised me. I'm glad it didn't turn into a blaxploitation movie, because some movies will give you a black guy as a hero and then make it over the top and make it unrealistic. I highly recommend this, and I give it a 9 out of 10.